Good morning, everybody. Well, good morning to those of you on the West Coast, and hope the rest of you are having a good day. My name is John Miller. I'm the marketing director for Lead2Goals. I wanted to welcome you today to our presentation on leading with emotional intelligence. I thought I'd give you a little bit of background on our presenter. The presenter today is Scott DeLong. He has bootstrapped 3 prior businesses. He has also run other people's businesses on an interim basis, getting them to a point where a smooth transition can occur with new management. He's both a coach and a teacher. Scott earned a master's degree in leadership development at the age of 54, then went on to earn his doctorate in leadership studies. He's a lifelong learner, loves delivering the content he has developed. His mission, and that for his company Lead2Goals, is to work with organizations to develop their leadership to reach their vision through the thoughtful alignment of their mission and values. I am happy to introduce Scott DeLong.
Thanks, John. Hey, I appreciate everybody taking the time to spend with us today. I've said this before, and that this is one of my favorite topics. I say that about almost every webinar we put on, but this one really is. And one of the reasons that it is because when I was finally starting to become aware of my own emotional intelligence, or lack thereof, is when I found a lot of growth within myself. I'd always been a business leader. I've always driven things, and if you can tell, I'm a little older than most of you. So I grew up in an era where management was management, and it was the great man theory of management, where all the traits of this great man, and they would just make all the decisions and make all the rules and just tell people what to do. And come to find out, that is just not the way business is operating today, nor should it be the way it operates today. So put together this program on leading with emotional intelligence, but it's just not a business program. I believe that emotional intelligence utilized throughout your life not only enhances relationships within the business, but it enhances the relationships that you'll have in your personal life as well. So today we're going to talk a little bit about where it came from, a little bit of the history of emotional intelligence, some of the benefits. We're not going to get too deep into techniques on how to improve, although some of that will come out. What I'm hoping is that you folks use the chat feature to throw questions out. John will be reading those and kind of prioritizing those for me. If I do that, I'll mess up the presentation. So hopefully, if you have a question, just throw something up in the chat and we can get to it towards the end. So here we go. I appreciate you showing up, and hopefully you enjoy the presentation. So what is emotional intelligence? Is it true intelligence? Sorry about that. The recording stopped for a minute. Is it true intelligence? Yes and no. The answer is it's not inbred. It's not something that you have to be born with in order to be good at. This is something that can be developed, and the answer is yes, it can be taught. Teaching is kind of a misnomer in there. It's more of awareness, and most of what we do happens through self-reflection processes. So while we'll bring up concepts and we'll bring up some of the theory behind it, some of the practice behind it, none of it works unless the people are willing to self-reflect and do something about it. The people that let me click this button here. So the benefits of emotional intelligence, right? And here's just a few. People with higher levels of EI have greater mental health, job performance. They actually get promoted faster. They have leadership abilities. The ability to create teams improves. They have lower stress levels within their life and greater happiness. These are all shown by studies, and we can get you examples of what those studies look like at the end, or if you request them, we can send those out to you as well. But these are actual benefits of emotional intelligence. And the scientific community and social science, right? The scientific community has some debate about emotional intelligence. In fact, when it became popular, it was popularized by Daniel Goleman in 1995 in his book, Emotional Intelligence. And then What Makes a Leader he followed that up with a Harvard Business Review. And basically, Goleman used to call it EQ because he opposed it to IQ. And the fact of the matter is, it's not EQ, it's emotional intelligence is now labeled EI. In fact, Goleman later revised what he said about it. And it is emotional intelligence is something that can be learned. EQ or IQ is a measurement of the intelligence quotient, and that's not a perfect science either. However, there are tests that folks can take to measure their IQ. And it's done based on pat answers that should be applied, right? With emotional intelligence, there are tests as well on those, but they are self-reported tests. So this is one's perception of their emotional intelligence. And again, if we don't get into the self-reflection, we will never get into improving our emotional intelligence, because it is your own perception. And in fact, it's the perception of others on your emotional intelligence. So prior to Goleman, Peter Salovey and John Mayer are associated with universities that did their studies, and they talked about emotional intelligence in a series of academic articles. So Goleman didn't create it. In fact, Salovey and Mayer didn't as well. It used to be called social intelligence was the concept that they did. Mayer and Salovey went a little bit deeper. Goleman popularized it. And then later, the scientific community, social scientific community got involved in Petrie's in 2000, wrote an article, and actually a series of articles after that, talking about the trait model of emotional intelligence. So we're going to do a little bit of that, then hopefully we get into some fun stuff. So there are 3 varieties of emotional intelligence, and you listen to this whole presentation, you'll find out there's actually a 4th, one that we've migrated to helping both the business and personal and professional lives of our clients. So the trait model, the Petrie's that came up, again, self-perception of the traits that lie at the lower levels of your personality. He believes these are ingrained traits that people have. He lists 15 of them, and those would be adaptability, assertiveness, emotional perception, both of self and others, emotional expression, yourself, emotional management of others, managing their emotions. I question that. Emotional regulation of self, impulsiveness. It talks about relationships, self-esteem, self-motivation, social awareness, stress management, empathy, happiness, and optimism. So Petrie's actually used some of the concepts that those that came before him did. So Salovey and Mayer talked about perceiving emotions, using emotions, understanding emotions, and managing emotions. Notice in their model, one of the things that they don't do is they talk about controlling emotions. I think there's a huge difference between trying to control your emotions and managing your emotions. And that's one of the things that we try to teach in our courses and with our clients. So the mixed model, the one that Goleman came up with, slightly different: self-awareness, self-regulation. So he's blending a few of the things, having the social skills. And the major one that he put in there is empathy. And Petrie's actually used empathy as well. And then motivation, the motivation to want to change. And that's where the self-reflection has to come back in to get something out of that. So let's talk a little bit about our program. We've changed it slightly, and it is not a lot different, but a little bit different, because we want to make it personal for folks. And the self-awareness becomes at the top. Understanding who you are, how you are perceived in the world as well. So often, most of us think that we're pretty good at this emotional intelligence stuff. Come to find out, we're really not. So we use some tools in our programs that identify the gaps between our own perception of self and others' perception of ourself and our emotional intelligence. So that's a pretty cool thing to look at. Sometimes it's hard to look at because if those gaps are wide, and you'll know when they're wide when you see a lot more conflict than you want to see, right? How you think you're presenting and how people are perceiving you. Well, we have a statement here, it's actually in a different course, that communication is what others hear and how they translate it. It's not what I say. And the same thing happens in this perception of emotions as well. I might present in a way. In fact, I've got a fatal flaw in mine. Like I welcome criticism. I like critique. I like people telling me things that I can be doing better. And my face hates it. Right. So that the ability to manage that first initial reaction when I'm hearing a critique. What do you mean? Like, in fact, there's things that I can see in myself besides the eyes frowning, but I can actually feel the blood pressure rising when I hear this critique. However, I know I need it, right? And here's how I've tried to change just that one thing in my own life is I've recognized that when somebody is criticizing me, they are actually trying to help me. With almost everybody. Again, 5% of the world has some narcissism or sociopathic tendencies, and this doesn't apply to them. I'm sorry, it just doesn't apply to those that are narcissistic or sociopathic. But the rest of the world, when they're criticizing me or when they're providing you with critique, they're actually trying to help us. From their point of view, they are. Doesn't mean they're right, but it means they're trying to help us. And that's how I've been able to try to enlist those criticisms and try to manage my own emotions when I'm doing there. Just change that and reframe that a little bit. So that's just one little technique. So the awareness of others' emotions. And again, we think we're good at this as well. And it might not necessarily be true. And there's a few reasons for that. So in part of our course, we talk about body language and the use of reading the room and reading an individual and their face, but some of that can be faked. We have a course on that as well, but some of it can be faked. And here's how that's worked. When we're children, do you remember your parents saying, "Wipe that smirk off your face, young man or young woman," or "Don't look sad," or those kind of comments that our parents did to us or others might have done to us. So we have learned to fake some of the facial expressions that happen within body language. But there are other things that are true. There's Dr. Ekman talks about micro expressions. Those can't be faked. There's that first quick 1/10 of 1 second kind of micro expression. You can read that a little bit. But also there are things that happen within the body that can't be faked or not faked. And we can go deeper into those at some point in the future. So the awareness of others' emotions, being able to pay attention not only to the words they're using, the tone that they're using, the pace that they're using their phrases, and their body language all matters in here. The next portion that we work on is self-regulation, and that is the part we get into managing our emotions. So not all emotions are bad. In fact, if you look at the 7 basic emotions, 5.5 of those are on the negative side. You've got anger, you've got surprises, kind of good and bad. You've got disgust, you've got contempt, you've got sadness, you've got fear, and then there's one good one, happiness, right? So of the 7 basic emotions, 5.5 of those can necessarily be looked at as negative. And sometimes those negative emotions aren't all bad. What they're there for is to motivate us to do something different. And we go really deep into that kind of work. Then the next portion is the social skills and how we present and how we deal with others, and making sure that we understand the audience, their needs, getting our message out, and trying to match our needs or our message and their needs together in order to get a comprehension with that. And then last is the motivation, is what are you willing to do about it, right? Are you self-motivated? And one of the things that I like to talk about in this self-motivation piece is there's 2 words that I use. Do I want to react to a situation, or do I want to take that information and act upon that? So I put those phrases in my head quite often. Do I want to react? Almost never. But I do want the information, and I want to be able to act upon the information. And these are skills that can be built. They can be taught. They can be built. Goleman talks about, there's a couple quotes that I like to use in here. What really matters for success, character, happiness, and lifelong achievements is a definite set of emotional skills. And this is back when he called it EQ. He says your EQ. Not purely cognitive abilities, which is the trait model, that are measured by conventional IQ tests. These are things that can be learned. Ken Blanchard, 1 Minute Manager, the biggest obstacle that stalls leaders' growth is the human ego. When leaders start to think that they know it all is when they stop growing. So those are some fun quotes that I like to throw around once in a while as well. So the process that we go through, and when we're trying to lead groups, I don't think as much teaching as is leading, because I don't think we talk much about anything that you don't already know. In fact, I tell people all the time that most of the things that you're going to learn in any of these courses that we teach, you already knew by the time you were in kindergarten. It's really how to play in a sandbox, right? Get along with others, get your message across, and all of that. The problem is adulthood got in the way, right? All the stresses of earning a living, raising kids, having bosses, having spouses, having all of that get in the way of us processing our true self, the self that we want, our best self. Let's call it our best self, the self that we used to know when we were a little child. So our process goes through a few things. So we do a 360-degree analysis of your emotional intelligence. All emotional intelligence is self-perception. Certainly it is that. Right? Everyone has a test for self-perceived emotional intelligence. You may not be right? You may think you are, but you may not be right, because what's important is how others perceive you. Being true to yourself, certainly, but how others perceive you is really where the communication happens. And so we do the 360, and we get, 8 to 10 of your cohort, your peers, your friends, your family, to do the same analysis of you. Then we take and normalize all the answers, and we come back in and we compare them. Two things we like to look at. The first is where you score yourself low on an emotional intelligence, or in any self-evaluation, where you score yourself low, we look at those areas. In the 5 areas that we're talking about, you take a look and you see the lowest one, you say, that's the one I want to improve. The one I'm already good at, yes, I want to keep practicing, I want to keep getting better, but the ones that I don't think I'm very good at are the ones that I want to work on. So we look at that. But even more important than that, and again, you could be wrong there as well, because others could perceive you differently. What we want to see are the gaps between how others see you and which category of others. There are so many times that I talk to people that tell me they're different at work than they are at home. I don't think you should be, but people believe that they need to be, right? So your peers at work might view you one way, and the people at home might view you in a different way. So we'll recategorize those things as well, and to show your work persona, your home persona. I think there should be one persona. May not work in your situation, but you'll learn how to build those muscles. I think with learning any new skill, or practice, it might not be a new skill, but practicing a skill that needs to get developed in a greater way, it's a matter of looking at it, analyzing it, coming up with exercises in order to figure out how to get better, practice, fail, practice some more, continue to practice. Most of the stuff that we work on it's a matter of progress, not perfection. So I think that taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back is still forward. And that's kind of how things go. So for me, I'm 62 years old. I had 60 years or 50 years before I started working on this stuff on myself. I had 50 years of being one way. It's not like flipping on a light switch. Just because I read a book, all of a sudden I'm great at that thing, right? It takes practice. It takes failure. It takes reanalyzing where it could have gone better, and then trying again, right? And dealing with that. So we go through that in a process. So we have the exercises, deeper understanding of your own emotions and the triggers that cause those. A lot of folks don't take a look at that, but there are triggers that cause the emotions. What are those triggers? When do they happen? Now, what am I going to do about it? And the ability to identify emotions in others is probably equally as important as being able to handle your others. Because again, when you're trying to communicate something with somebody, whether it's giving a speech or talking one-on-one, you need to deliver to the audience if you want to be perceived properly. How are they seeing things? So understanding who they are. So we'll give you tools that'll assist you when you're flooded with emotions. And we do get flooded, right? So what does flooding look like? Somebody says something to me, my face turns red, and I just go, my mind just starts, the whole fight or flight syndrome comes in, right? Adrenaline kicks off. And then do I act in my best self at that point? Hardly ever. So what kind of tools can we put together for that? One of the basic ones is working on breath work. Just learning to be, it's the concept is called mindfulness, but breath work, yoga, meditation, things like that work. And you don't always have time in the moment to practice that, right? So that's why we do the practice in advance and continue to practice. I've gotten myself to a spot through deliberate practice that with one breath, I can get my head back into that space that I need to in almost every situation. Probably not everywhere. I make as many mistakes as anyone else in this, but if I go through the practice, I can get myself back in a spot that I want to be with a single breath because I've done the work in advance. And some of the courses that we put together do that for you. So this process allows you to work through your weaknesses, your own perceived, and then the gaps on how others perceive those. So it's pretty fun as well. How we normally do these courses is that.
Hey, Scott.
Yeah.
Could I interject? We had a question that may actually relate to the last comment you made.
Okay.
Let's see. Chelsea Chapman asked, how does one deal with a fellow leader that is low in EI and high in narcissistic tendencies? And added that efforts to engage and in development of EI have been skirted.
Yeah, that's difficult. And again, I talk about the two areas, the sociopath and the narcissist. Most of us aren't sociopaths, but there are a lot of narcissists out there. And can that behavior be modified? Sure, it can. But sometimes that behavior turns into Machiavellianism, right? And what that is a narcissist using the tools that they have gained through emotional intelligence to manipulate. So if I had a narcissist in my group, in my team, and whatever, I would work one-on-one with that person deeply to get them to realize what it is that they're doing to others, not for or not with others, but to others. And if they want to continue down that path and continue to do things to people instead of with and for people, they don't belong in my tribe anymore. I'm sorry, there's some people that I have to turn and walk away from. Even in, I had a business partner at one point in my life that those traits presented themselves. Work on it. Ask what part of this is what's my part in this as well. And they come to a time when it just realized that this was no longer a match. This is something we couldn't overcome. So you're not going to be able to fix it with everybody. In fact, you're not going to be able to fix anybody else. The only person you can fix is yourself and the way you react to that situation. I'll try. And when I realize there is no getting around it, I'd probably walk away. And hopefully that answered the question. Okay. So I was talking about how we normally work these courses. This one happens to be a short course. It's only 5 weeks. And we usually do it within business organizations. And that's a great way to help build a team. It is amazing the amount of trust that gets developed in just a very short time when people are working on something together, when they're working on themselves and the ability to be vulnerable and share that within this group. And you say, well, nah, my team wouldn't do that. That's not true. They will. They will. And I haven't had an unsuccessful group yet. And by success, I mean 2 things. One is that people get a strong awareness of themselves and recognize a need to make changes. And they all do. We all can do something better than we did yesterday. So there's also, and the last week of this, we actually have the motivation section has an action plan for self to work on. So when people are working on themselves and with a group, they tend to become a team pretty quick. It is amazing how that works. So we do it in the corporate environment, but we've also decided that we would start sending some of these things out to individuals and bringing a cohort on people like people that are on this group may not know each other yet. And then the focus there is to not only do the self-reflection, but to learn from others' experience and others sharing and all of that. And these courses tend to start slow because we're strangers, right? But then we don't become strangers very long. So one of the reasons that we talk about taking courses like this, Tom Peters, it's one of my favorite business gurus. He's 78 years old now. He wrote In Search of Excellence back in, I think it was 1980 or something around that. But he says a passive approach to professional growth will leave you by the wayside. It means you got to do something about it. It means you have to be, once you're aware, you have to do something about it, or you're going to be left out and you're not going to be there. So we've got a course coming up that's open up to individuals here instead of the group. If your team wants to do that, great, let's do that. But starting in February, it's going to be a 5-week course. We meet once a week. They're 80-minute sessions. Why 80 and not 90? Well, so you have 10 minutes to get to your next meeting. It just gives you an opportunity to get there. Includes all the course materials, the 360-degree emotional intelligence survey, and we're offering a discount for folks that want to go in here. So if you're interested in that, get in touch with us at the end. But that's not what this is about. This webinar is about getting people to take a look at self. There are all kinds of things that you can go to on the internet without having to come to a course like mine, and take a look at those. Like, how am I perceived? How am I perceiving others? And with the most part, people are good. Other than that 5%, right? People are good. They may do weird things from time to time. They may do things that you think their intent is improper from time to time, but people are good. And if you give them a chance, they'll show you that they're good. And giving them a chance, it goes back into this whole emotional intelligence piece. It really will help you manage conflict so much better with your understanding. They don't need to know anything about it. And the whole conflict gets better. It's the ability to create this, what's called psychological safety within the room, to get people to share and open up and talk and think and let you know what they're thinking. And it just provides space for them so that you can get more information and then you can act upon that information. Remember, we're not talking about controlling your emotions here. We're talking about managing them. And managing them takes information from the outside. It takes information from the inside and putting the best proposal together that you can. Best proposal, best conversation, best discussion, best any of those sorts of things. So it's really, a lot of folks would go, oh, a lot of self-help stuff. Yeah, it's self-help. You're not only helping yourself, you're helping your friends, you're helping your neighbors, you're helping your cohort at work, your peers, you're helping your boss by improving yourself when you go through processes like this. So we put out a lot of content, a lot of free information as well. So if you'd like more of that, just get in touch with us at Lead2Goals, or we have a podcast that we put out, myself and a partner put out one called the CEO podcast. We'd love for you to listen to that and share what you have to say. Questions, complaints, like challenges, right? And I hope there's some of these on there. I see there's some chat. John, you have any more questions for us?
No more questions at the moment, but if anybody had some, feel free to chime in. Also, if you're interested in receiving some of our content, we send out, not overbearing, but we do send out latest blog articles, tips, tools for businesses, videos. I will put the link in the chat box, and you can click that and sign up to receive any of that content.
So we got a little bit of time. If anyone has any questions they want to ask, to check in. That first question was really good. I wish I had a better answer other than, hey, it's tough with a narcissist. But any other questions out there?
At this point, if you'd feel more comfortable just unmuting and asking a question, I think that would be okay.
Don't be shy. Go ahead.
Scott, how do you deal with reading emotions and how you're going to be looking at them when you're dealing with different cultures? And particularly in this world of COVID, we're online. And so I'm dealing with people that are from different cultures. English is not their first language. You're really at a disadvantage, especially when you can't be around them for the nonverbal communications and the things that you can pick up over time. But any suggestions of how to increase your radar screen to understand how best to talk to them?
I think there are. Different cultures have different, I don't know, their own styles, right? And I don't want to get into all of them, but folks from Russia have certain traits. Folks from some of the Asian cultures have certain traits. Australians and US are kind of a similar nature, like we're kind of bold and out there. But if I had folks that I knew were going to be from a culture that I didn't understand, I'd study up on the culture a little bit before that as well. And then the reading of the room. The first thing that I always do, and except on these webinars, right, is if I'm going to hold a meeting, I need everybody's, if we're doing it on Zoom, I need to have your camera on. I can't tell anything by this wonderful portrait that you put up here, or how you're even accepting the information that I'm giving. But I have trained myself to be, and you can't do it in a group of 50 people either, because you can't just scroll through everybody and see how everybody doing it. But if you have a small group, a team getting together, 8-10 people, and they all show up on here, having your cameras on, and while you're presenting, while you're discussing, while someone else is presenting, scanning the room. I know I'm supposed to be looking at the camera so that you can see my eyes, but I'm not doing that because I want to see how people are reacting to this. Put those together with the clues that I've done on my previous research from, the culture of somebody that came from China, or somebody that came from the Philippines or Russia or somewhere else. Some of those traits, you can't be perfect. You won't be perfect with this because people have individual preferences as well. However, generally there are some traits that you can look for. So while you're scanning the room, you're looking for things like the raising of the eyebrows, or the furrowing of the brow, or hand gestures, or whether or not they're on texting and not even paying attention to you. You can see that. And one of the things that I like to do is when I see something different, I just have a check-in with them. Hey, Joe, what's happening over here? I see something's a little different. How are you receiving this? What are you thinking? Right? I used to think that was putting people on the spot. And if I'm in a classroom, I won't necessarily do that because I can read a whole body language deal and get the conversation moving, get people going. But on Zoom, it's a little more difficult. And I may need to call on somebody and ask them a question about, and this is going to be weird coming in a business context, but ask them about how they're feeling. How many people talk about the word feeling in the business context, right? I do all the time. And the reason I do is because feelings are real, and feelings make us do things. How I feel about something is how I present to others. So I have to have the cameras on so I can see who's reacting in whatever ways. And they may not get my eyes on the camera this way, but at least I can see what they're thinking, or assume what they're thinking, even though assuming is not the right word. I can read what it is that the room's doing. So that's the best I can give you on a short answer. Does that help at all?
Yeah.
Zoom is tough.
Yeah.
Zoom is tough, but we've gotten better at it, right? Couldn't you say from the first time you were on a Zoom call to now you're able to perceive more things?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I just don't believe that cameras should be off when we're having a Zoom call. I just don't. And that's a little bit of hard-nosed approach to stuff, but I need to see if it's landing or not. Is the message landing?
Is this basically behavioral psychology in a nutshell? Is what you're looking at is learning styles and the type of person that they are, and you're basically looking at it from all those different viewpoints so that you can speak to them, to their wavelength, so to speak.
It's
different more than that.
It's understanding the audience. Right. It is understanding the audience. The more we know our teams, and there's a difference between a group and a team, right? All teams are a group, but not all groups are a team. And the more we get closer to that team concept, which means that we have a shared mission that we want to work on, and we have a way to communicate, and we've built trust with each other. If you haven't got trust built within a group, it's tough to get the best out of people. So that's the first thing that I try to do always when I'm working with small groups and working within an organization. Trust is the first thing that we look to build. And we actually have a methodology that we use that builds trust not only faster, but deeper. And it's typically trust is built in by watching somebody do what they say they're going to do over and over and over, and we start to trust them, right? We have the confidence that they have the ability, and they have the benevolence that they want to get that thing done. And we start trusting those people. So we've got a process, and it's really mostly a communication process that ends up building trust not only faster than over repetitive natures, but deeper. And we get deeper with folks, and it's really cool. It's a real simple program, and it's based on a circle and a cycle. And the circle is starting with respect. And this isn't the kind of respect that I grew up with, which was, hey, respect is earned, it's not given. I mean, how many of you have heard of that before? I'm talking about the respect for human dignity, the respect for that person as an individual. They're in the room for some reason. And even if they're not, right? If we have to go down lower and we find out that all they're trying to do is be happy and raise good kids, at least we've got that in common, starting there and then giving them the benefit of the doubt. The next stage goes back to a old Stephen Covey thing, is that's listen to understand. Most of us listen to reply. We hear somebody make a statement or a question, and we're quick to give a reply. Now, we do that with good intentions usually. The intention is to try to make a connection with that person, but what that ends up doing usually is pushes the person further away. I'm not fully listening to understand their point of view. I'm listening. I want to make sure they get my point of view. And what does that do? It pushes people away. The next step after we learn how to do that, to listen to understand, is to share from experience, which is opposed to telling somebody what to do. The biggest change I made in my life between the time I was 50 and I was this real dominant leader, manager type. I thought leader, but it was more of a manager. Do things my way or else kind of guy. It wasn't that bad, but it's like, here's the way to do it. It's the only way, it's the best way, it's whatever. Is I took one word out of my vocabulary, or tried to. I still use it once in a while. The word should. I have no idea what you should do. I don't have your background. I don't have your experience. I don't have your problems. I don't have your joys. I don't have all of that. I do know what I would do. And I had a similar circumstance, and it felt like this. And here it goes, that word feelings again. Why do I keep using the word feelings? Because it matters. Feelings matter. Feelings get to a story, and people love stories. When I did that, here's what happened to me. I'm not telling you don't do that because you're going to get burnt, right? What I'm saying is, here's what happened to me. And then the fourth portion of this is delivering, what we call delivering on the promise, which is the old school way of developing trust. Do what you say you're going to do and do it over and over and over. Well, that's the fastest way to break trust. So you have to do it. You have to do what you say you're going to do. So respect, listen to understand, share from experience, and deliver on the promise. It's my belief, and I've gone through this a few times, is that you run through that cycle 3 times, you've got a relationship because you've built some trust. All positive relationships are built on trust. You cannot have a positive relationship with somebody if you don't trust them. Think about it in your own lives, at work, at home, doesn't matter where. If you don't trust the people you're dealing with, you're not going to have a good relationship with them. So this process of the circle of trust and the cycle within that, the 3 times, right? It really does work. And there's a few other words that match in there. And these are 3 that have been part of my journey and that I wasn't very good at when I was young. And in fact, I avoided them. One is vulnerability, even in the workplace. Humility, empathy, and then dependability, which you just have to be if you want people to trust you. So those things fit within our circle, and we've kind of created this funnel with that. But vulnerability, empathy, and humility are great traits if you want to be a leader. Did that get to your question, Bob, or did I overdo your question?
No, you did a great job.
Okay,
Great job. And if, I'll let others ask questions. I got another one, but I'll wait until others get their stuff going.
Okay. Anybody else? Jump in.
Feel free to unmute and ask a question.
Hello?
Jessica.
Hi,
Hello.
I'm wondering, outside of that thing you said about trust is just so resonating. I really enjoyed that.
Thank you.
Outside of that exercise of building trust, do you have other recommendations for sort of team building sort of activities that can foster positivity in a work group?
Yeah. There's, if you go to the old school team building things, they have you doing rope things and trust falls and that sort of thing. Those are just fun. I mean, they're fun. There's nothing wrong with them. It's a bonding experience. But I think the exercises that we do is try to get people to open up about who they are. If I want to really trust somebody, I need to know there's two forms of trust. There's the cognitive trust, which is I believe that they have the competency and the skills and the benevolence to get something done. The work trust, right? The thing that we deal with at work all the time. That person's a good engineer and he wants to do a good job and he's going to get it done by that. We build trust in people in a cognitive sense. But then there's a different one. It's called the affective trust. And the affective trust is, it gets down to likability, right? It is, if you, and when they talk about the cognitive trust, they talk about the trust from the head, and the affective trust is the trust from the heart. I think that's the key that most businesses are missing is the trust that comes from the heart, or the affective trust. And the way to build that, in my experience, or at least a process that we've created to do that, is to get people to open up and talk about themselves, who they are, what's important to them. And the other portion of that, the fastest way to earn that trust, is to really listen to them. People want to be heard. They need to feel felt. And if you do that, you will start attracting people more and more and more. So how do you go about doing that? Well, you got to create that psychological safety. You got to create a safe space for people. And I know that's a millennial buzzword, creating a safe space that came from the universities, but it's true. People aren't going to open up to you if they have some fear. I mentioned earlier that when I was young, I wasn't allowed to be vulnerable. There were people that would step on my neck in my own family if I was to show weakness, because they mentioned vulnerability and weakness together. It's not a weakness. It's a strength. In fact, what I've found for me in the past 12 years of my life is that vulnerability has been the most attractive quality I can present. And I don't mean physically attractive. I mean attracting people. Very few people will step on my neck. I just happen to grow up with a couple of them. And it really changed from, the way I played in the sandbox with people, because I couldn't trust them with who I am and what I'm doing. So I really like small group communication. I think, when you're working with your small teams and you build that sense, a lot of people say, oh, start with a joke and do that kind of, that's good. But I think there's icebreakers that you can do with your team that just present a little bit of them now. If you start full bore and say, tell me everything about yourself and what you love, that's not going to work in the workplace. But you can start guiding people in at the beginning of every meeting and having some sort of an icebreaker that reveals a little bit about themselves. When they see that what they're revealing is being accepted and people are curious about it, they will start going a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And eventually you will end up having a situation where you're just willing to share with people because you trust them. They're not going to use that information against you. And that's the affective trust. I think if we added the affective trust to the cognitive trust that we already have with the people that we work with, you blend those things together, amazing things happen within the workplace. It's a place I want to show up to. It's a place I want to give my best to, because these are my people. This is my tribe. And you're not going to find that out with your typical meetings when you say, give me a report on this and how's it going in engineering and the kind of reports that you've seen in the business world. But you've got to get down to a personal level if you want to build that affective trust. Combine that with the cognitive trust, you got some magic happening. Helpful at all, Jessica?
I agree completely. Thank you so much.
Okay.
That's super helpful.
It's a matter of practice, though, right? It's not, hey, here's an exercise, do this over and over and over. Yeah, no, practice. see what works, see what doesn't work, because you're going to have different people within the group, people that come from different places and at different stages in it as well. Give them a chance to inch their way in. If I had a small group of 7 people and there was one person that was really standoffish like this, right? I don't think they'd stay that way for long, because everyone else is sharing and enjoying, right? We're social creatures. When you get to enjoy other people, like, that's great. Let's do more of that. Let's do it in the workplace too. I'm not talking about wasting time either. I'm talking about building relationships so that we can get more out of each other.
Hey, Scott,
Yes,
somebody added a question in the chat box, and really seems to be asking, it's from Marie, how to stay motivated. I'm sorry, I can't talk today, apparently. How to stay motivated after you've been suffering from symptoms of burnout.
Get motivated to get back to the job after some burnout. Okay. I think the first thing that you need to do is take a little break. And whether that's a vacation, or whether that's a weekend, or whether that's a 10-minute meditation session, to take a break and clear your mind. That's the first piece of that. Does that stop all the work from happening that's been piling up on you? No, that doesn't. But what it does is help clear your mind so that you can help reorganize that pile of work, or the stressful situations that you've been getting into. So I think taking a break first. The other portion of that is, once you've taken that break and you have a clear mind, trying to see the world from a new perspective. Everyone has a point of view, right? And if I'm just going down the path and I have my blinders on, like the horses on the track, right? You have the blinders on and all you can see is the work in front of you, then that's all you're going to see. But if I can start opening up those blinders a little bit and start seeing more peripheral view, which I can't do if I don't take that break. And again, for me, if I get into a hostile situation, one breath now, I can do, okay, let's go. And now I'm back in it. Now, one breath's not going to happen if you're overly burnt out, but taking some sort of a mental break first. Sit in a jacuzzi with a glass of wine if that's what your mental break is. It doesn't matter to me, but find what it takes to you to get that mental break. Then relook at it with fresh eyes. See what's really out there. If there's more work that you can handle, have a conversation with the people that are piling the work on with you. Tell them what your limits are. And maybe they'll help you see things from a different point of view as well. But if you don't speak up, then they'll never know. And they'll keep piling more stuff on you. So learning how to communicate, and here's an important piece, the ability to speak truth to power. Telling your boss or whoever's creating that stress to you what's important to you and how it's important. And there's another catchphrase that I like to say, you need to learn how to say what you mean without being mean. All right. So hopefully that helps a little bit, but take a break. That's the first step. And then relook at things. Anybody else? Okay, we're getting to the last 2 minutes. So John's going to put together, and he'll probably send an email out or through LinkedIn or something, a copy of the presentation. If you're interested in seeing it, please share it with anybody that wants to. I think we didn't give a lot of answers, but there's never a quick fix to any change, right? People come in looking for a light switch, like turn it on, turn it off, right? Change doesn't work like that. Change more like a dimmer switch. We're going to get a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better. We're going to go backwards a little bit. We're going to get a little bit better and keep working on it. You'll get to the changes that you're looking for in your life. I want to thank you all for staying on for so long and staying interested. Again, if you have any questions, please email them to me too, or pick up the phone and call. I love talking about this stuff, helping people out, doing what they need to do. Sometimes it's just a quick refresher. It's just like that, take a break answer, right? Sometimes it's just that, and you need someone else to give you permission because you're just too in the weeds. If you ever get to that spot, give me a call.
All right, thank you, everybody. I did add links for the course if anybody's interested in learning more about that in the chat box. as well as the link for email sign up. And then feel free to follow us on LinkedIn at Lead2Goals, on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all of those things. We constantly post our content in all of those outlets, and have plenty of videos on YouTube.
And don't forget the CEO podcast. That's not just me giving lectures. That's a guy, one of my partners and I just having a great time in a conversation. So please sign on to that and listen. You might get something out of that as well. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
I'll stay on for a few minutes if anyone wants to just chat. I'm in no rush, but I wanted to give everybody else opportunity to say that's the end of the presentation.
Scott, I got something. You're talking about, changing your state. That's kind of like varieties of consciousness. There's different ways to change state, and you can use that as a tool with people to be able to get to the root of who they are. Within reason, there's many things that you can't do that change our states. That would be way out of spec for that. But chocolate, alcohol to some degrees. Changing the environment. Yeah. Doing different things that can lead you to changing the way that they process information, and it might allow you to see them in a different light. Is that something that you see as a useful way of doing?
Absolutely. So my change of state is breath work. I just one quick breath. I can see things differently. Usually, right? Usually, there's no perfect solution. I mentioned having a glass of wine and a jacuzzi. I don't want you to go get drunk to change your state. That's not what I'm talking about. But changing the way, taking the blinders off. Remember we said the horse and the blind. Just taking the blinders off and see if I can see things in a different light. One of my favorite sayings is. Well, it's a concept, which is, I ask myself, why would a reasonable, rational person look at things like this, which is the opposite of how I might have looked at it, right? And then I say to myself, this one that I think is really important is, just because I'm right doesn't mean you're wrong. There can be different interpretations. I mean, think about how many different interpretations on something as solid as the Bible, right? There's one Bible and there's how many versions and how many people interpret that thing differently, and who's wrong? None of them. They're all within their realm, right? So just because you're right doesn't mean I'm wrong, or the other way around. So changing your state, just changing the mindset is all that is get out of my head, take a breath. Why would a reasonable, rational person think like that? And the first time I tried that, they think, well, because they're not rational. Well, that's probably not true. They probably are too. They're just not seeing things the way you're seeing them. And how can I do that? I can do it by exploring with them. Once I get myself into this better state, create that psychological safety, I like to ask questions. Find out more about what they're thinking and how they think. We want to get down to the why, their why, right? But you don't want to ask why, because why sounds accusatory. It sounds like, why are you so stupid? That's when you say, why would you think like that, right? You're talking down to somebody. But if you can ask them in a different way, it's interesting. I haven't seen it like that. Tell me more. They will tell you their story. You'll get to their why, and then maybe have an understanding. Again, it doesn't mean that their solution has to fit your life. But having an understanding of their solution makes you smarter. It gives you more data. Why not explore it? Takes a little bit of time, sure. Why not explore it? I'm really big on not avoiding conflict, but managing conflict, because I think conflict can be a good thing. And if it's managed properly, we can get better solutions than we could have on our own, by trying to understand where they're coming from, or enhance our own solution, right? That we don't have to just take theirs, but we can enhance our own based on the information they're providing. So anyway, this is all fun stuff. It's interesting to look at things from other people's point of view before determining they're just foolish or they're a narcissist. Give them a chance to prove that they have something to say too.
How about reading people in context of their company? Because people are kind of a collective of who they are, but also what their company represents and how the company does business. And you can look at social profiles and all these other things for people, but to also factor in how the company typically acts, it's kind of almost a multiplying factor, at least at the early stages when you're meeting someone. Would you say that that's somewhat?
I think that people put on masks based on where they're working and if they can tolerate it long enough. I've got a philosophy in my life is that my personal values have to meet up with the core values of a company. Otherwise, I can't possibly be happy there. You can't pay me enough to work in a place where our values are so far apart that we just can't see eye to eye. Yeah. Or you can't pay me enough for very long. I mean, I'll figure it out and I have to leave. But it's not worth being unhappy just to get a paycheck. And especially in today's environment, there are jobs out there, right? The workers have the power today of being able to move around and increase their wages and make demands and do all that. It's just different than it used to be. And why be unhappy? Why go into a place just because they're giving me a paycheck? So I think if you can create the space, I've coached people before, and the coaching led to them leaving a job. Now the company paid me to coach them, but I think it's also better off if there's not a set of shared values. It's better off for the company for these people to leave as well. It turns into cancer, right? And that can spread throughout an organization. So I'd like to get the masks off and say who that we're really hiring. And then that goes back into the hiring process as well. Take longer to hire people and make sure that sure they have to have some of the skills, but you can teach skills. What you can't teach is values. Those come with the people. So I want to meet up with the values in someone before I ever hire them. Anyway, another soapbox moment for me. Sorry about that.
Great.
Anybody else?
We haven't had any more questions in the chat.
Okay, great. Well, I appreciate the time that everyone spent. Again, my phone's right up there. The email's right up there. Get in touch if you want. And happy to continue to talk. Thank you very much.